Fasting is not just about not eating and not drinking. In Ibn Majah it mentions how many a person fasts and yet has no benefit from the fast except for hunger and thirst. It's not just about fasting. There has to be a change in your behavior. Your behavior has to be different in Ramadan than outside Ramadan. Otherwise, the only thing is that you're not eating and drinking. And that's why in Bukhari it mentions the fast is a shield. It's a protection. If one of you is fasting, then they should neither engage in foul talk or argue. If another person insults them or fights with them, they should say, Inni sa'im. I am fasting, I am fasting. Right? I've not got time for this. If you want to discuss this, leave it to after Ramadan. But my Ramadan's too important for me to spoil it with arguing with anyone. And that's why Imam Ghazali talks about that fasting has different levels. And he says that there's also fasting of the limbs. It's not just about you not eating and drinking, it's about fasting of the limbs. So he talks about sight, you're looking. He says fasting with your eyes is to stay away from anything blameworthy, which preoccupies the heart from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we can make a practical example of switching off the TV for Ramadan, not watching movies, going to the cinema for Ramadan, other things that are obviously prohibited, you shouldn't do it anyway, but in Ramadan it's even more so. Speech, he says that you should also fast with your tongue. How do you fast with your tongue? By avoiding anything which is displeasurable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like lying, swearing, arguing, making false promises, and just generally just talking about things which have no benefit. They actually have no benefit, right? So talking about the sports and spending an hour talking about sports, and what benefit is it? Is there any benefit in them? Right? So the month is too important. Every moment that passes is so important that you've got to make benefit of it. You can talk about sport after Ramadan. You can talk about other things after Ramadan. Okay, leave it for this month. He talks about fasting with the ears. How do you fast with the ears? By avoiding listening to anything displeasurable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So gossip, backbiting, these are all things you shouldn't do anyway, but in Ramadan it's even worse. Instead, get your ear accustomed to listening to the Quran, listening to nasheeds, listening to anything which makes you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then talks about fasting with the hand. Okay, fasting with the hand. And he says to avoid any injustice that could be done with your hand and any act of cruelty. And you may think, well, we don't have servants, I don't hit anybody. But what do you do with your hands? All of us have phones, we text, we email. What kind of text are you sending? What kind of emails are you sending? What is the content? Are you going to hurt anyone by sending that text? These are all things we can apply practically. Then he talks about the stomach. You're saying, well, can you fast with the stomach? I'm already fasting the stomach, I'm not eating or drinking. Imam Ghazali says not to overeat. Not to overeat. Because there are some people who actually put on weight in Ramadan. There are actually some people who put on weight in Ramadan because they eat more in Ramadan than they do outside Ramadan. Right? The point is not, when I was in the Middle East, I used to see strange stuff. They used to have all night restaurants, and people would just eat all night long, and then at Fajr time they'd go to sleep all day long. That's not fasting. That's not what fast is all about. So Imam Haddad actually mentions advice about eating. He says the minimum is that you do not eat more in Ramadan than you eat outside Ramadan. That's the minimum, right? So it's not about I've got 3 hours to eat, let's stuff my face. That's not what Ramadan's all about. And lastly, he says fasting with the heart, which is being between fear and hope as to whether Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted our fast. Do we know whether Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted our fast or not? We don't know. We hope, we fear that He's not accepted it, that's why we keep trying, and we hope, we make dua, and we hope because we hope with all our deficiencies, with everything, our fast is going to have deficiencies. We hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy descends upon us and He accepts us. So we have to be careful of what we look at and what we hear, because it all affects the heart.